I thought, if other folks come in, they'll just miss some of your introductions, but it'd probably be good to forge ahead here. And I guess also we have 2 hours set aside for this, but if we feel like we are faster than that, because especially not everyone's here, that's fine. I'll kind of leave it to you folks to decide when we're concluding. And so, I think that we all know that the purpose of this gathering is just to shake and howdy between the two commissions, because I think there's been some questions about what folks are working on and how can we cross-pollinate more effectively. So this is supposed to be a catalyst for that. No motions, no decisions. Any inkling of policy that we take from this will carry back to our respective commissions for debate and approval. And I guess with that, we could just go around and do some introductions. I threatened to somebody to have an icebreaker question, but I've been unfortunately busy this week and I don't have a good one. So
you could just, Stu, you could just say that your question melted.
I could say that.
That's really why we're here. It's about a melting, so it's kind of perfect. That.
Okay, well, I'll let you stand in for me there. So I will begin, I suppose, because I'm at the one talking at the moment. But as far as roles, Elizabeth is here for a short while. She may need to drop off. And if she does, I may be more distracted with operating the meeting. But hopefully we'll all be here by that point, and we won't need to mess about with the settings. There's no real structure to this except to say that we want to introduce and give each other updates about what's going on, and then talk broadly about how we think we might be able to work together or what opportunities we see. So for my part, I think everybody knows me. I'm Stu, and I've been working on the Ashland Climate Plan stuff since somewhere in the neighborhood of 2014, 2015. I was on the first committee that helped write the plan, so I have a pretty good understanding of why the pieces are set out the way they are. I was also hired on staff, which I swore I would never take that challenge on when we were part of the first committee. But it's been really interesting, and it's very good opportunities in Ashland, I think, to do climate work. So that's why I keep doing what I do. I'm going to leave it at that for now because you all know me pretty well, but you don't know each other. So let's just go. Elizabeth, do you want to say a word, or should we keep you behind the scenes? I want to say thank you to Elizabeth because she rocks both of these commissions all the time.
So true.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Don't mind, I'll stay behind the scenes. I'm kind of trying to do something else in the background.
Okay,
so.
I suspected. So I'll just go down the list of who is on my participant panel here, since I know we're all on different orders on each other's screen. So Rebecca Walker, you're the first on the top of after Elizabeth.
Thanks, Stu. Usually it comes up as Bex Walker, so it must have gone through a different Zoom account. But nice to meet you all. I'm Bex Walker. I'm the Sustainability Manager at Southern Oregon University and also the chair of the Conservation and Climate Outreach Commission. I moved here from Scotland 10 months ago now, back in November. It's been an interesting 10 months to decide to move to the other side of the world. It's been a journey, but I feel very lucky to, during this challenging time, to have settled into a beautiful community, enjoying getting stuck in to my job here at SOU, as well as enjoying the outdoors that Southern Oregon has to offer. Just as a side, because I was messaged by friends in Scotland today, there's a very peaceful protest going on outside Scottish Parliament at the moment. Scotland has very sort of world-leading progressive climate change legislation that I worked on with Scottish Government in a previous job. And so Extinction Rebellion, who are very active in the UK, Europe, and other parts of the world, I know they are active to a degree here in America. they are saying they've sent a letter to Scottish ministers saying thank you for that leadership, but that they need to back it up with some action as well. So one of the members of Extinction Rebellion asked me to write a letter about my experience in the fires last week in terms of the forest mismanagement and climate change and just the emotional side, that personal impact of climate change. So that right now is sitting outside Scottish Parliament, and I've been sent photos of people reading it. So although I applaud Scotland with that world leading targets, and we look at countries like that saying great, it's actually, to me, it's come so much more to the fore that targets are great, but we need action. So I'm really, really happy to be part of this meeting and part of the commission at City of Ashland.
Well, thank you, Bex. I know a lot of folks here worked with Roxanne, who predated
Yes.
Bex, and SOU was lucky to have Roxanne, and they're also very lucky to have replaced her with you. So
Thank you, Stu.
thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Risa Buck, you are next. But before you go, I should tell everybody, just for disclosure, that we're recording this, and there was a link on the website. So at some point, the general public could be watching, but I don't think anybody's here. But I just wanted to let you know that that's happening. So,
I like how you mentioned that just before Risa talks.
He was hoping. He was just hoping.
coincidence or synchronicity? I don't know.
Both.
Go ahead, Risa, please.
My name's Risa. I'm a part of the Conservation Climate Outreach Commission and lived in Ashland since 1991. And really it was the adventure of building my 800 square foot house that originally was off the grid that really got me connected to the city of Ashland. And it was just right around that time in 1995 or 6 that the first conservation commission was created, back when Ken Hagan and Dick Wanderscheid and other folks from yesteryear were very involved with kind of paving the path that we all are continue to be on with Ashland and sustainability. I worked for a number of years with the local trash folks. Was Ashland Sanitary, and it's now Recology. I quit that job 4 years ago and continue on with the commission as a citizen.
Thank you, Risa. Let's see. Next up, we have Jeff Wyatt.
Well, hello. Again, my name is Jeff Wyatt, and I'm new to the Climate Policy Commission just the past couple of months. So I'm really getting up to speed on things like the SEEP and Chapter 11 of the city's master plan. I'm currently doing some work for the commission, looking at what's happening at the state level with the building codes and the Public Utility Commission. But again, I'm kind of new to the game. I'm an engineer, project manager. I've got a long and checkered history. As a chemical engineer, you come out of school and you go to work in the chemical industry. So I've worked for Procter & Gamble, for Chevron. I also worked in a Silicon Valley startup for a number of years doing material science work. And along the way, I did some postgraduate work in economics at the University of London. And a lot of my career had to do with environmental impacts. I cleaned up Superfund sites, and I designed things that required an awful lot of permitting and so on. And as I moved through my career, it really became obvious that the cumulative environmental impact that the human race is having on the earth is just, we've got to change direction somehow, some way. So there's nuclear weapons and there's climate change. Those are the two big issues that I think our civilization needs to come to grips with.
Thank you, Jeff. Uh-oh. The order is changing on my panel screen. Okay, Steph, would you please say a few words?
Sure. Well, my history goes back. I think are you seeing James? Is he really up next?
No.
No?
excuse-
You go ahead, Steph.
You can see me, okay. I've been interested in ecology and conservation probably all my life. My parents were very involved with those issues. Before I moved to Ashland, I worked at Seacliff Park in tearing out pampas grass and ice plant, and working on trying to, when I was living in Santa Cruz, reestablish native plants like the beach verbena. When I came, I lived in Ashland initially in the 70s and came back in 2006, at which time I worked on the Park Commission. I was the chair of that commission. I worked on the Forest Lands Commission and helped write the Forest Master Plan. I worked on Firewise and the Ad Hoc Climate Commission that came after the initial SEEP was developed. So I've been working with it for a while, and I suppose what I'm with the way things are going right now, the tipping point is tipping even more, and I want to be sure that that the needs of the environment and the SEEP are really highlighted. They are for me. So that's why I've been a liaison with the Conservation Commission, because I just feel it's so important. I like to do environmental art at home. I do glass work, and I've done a number of different installations about climate change. And if you can remember, Risa, when we were back at the recycling thing, I used to make soda pop top necklaces and give them to people to remind them about reusing and repurposing. So anyway, that's me.
Great, thank you, Steph. Bob.
I'm also a newcomer to town. I've been here now for, I guess, 14 months, since middle of last year. And actually one of the reasons why my wife and I moved to Ashland after traveling for a few years. And
Hey, Bob, I can't hear you. I don't know if everybody else can.
can't hear me.
Yeah, talk louder, please.
Okay, how's that? Is that better? Can you hear me now? Is that okay? So I was saying that I moved here about 14 months ago, and my wife and I settled here after traveling for a few years, specifically because of what things that a lot of you did, working on environment, and we were attracted to moving to a smaller community in the West. We're from the East Coast of the United States. Wanted to come west and experience living in the West, in one of the Western states, and we were impressed by the work that you'd done on in particular on climate change. So we knew about that as we were researching a place to come to. Professionally, I was trained as an economist, policy person, and I've spent my entire career in Latin America, pretty much all over Latin America, working at the national policy and programs, and also municipal levels, including on environment and climate. So I bring some of that background to some of the issues that we're facing here, although I have no, US-based experience really to speak of. So I'm excited to be on the commission. I'm also one of the newer members. I wasn't on it when it was first appointed last summer, and came on, I think about a couple of days or a couple of weeks before we stopped meeting entirely for a few months. So I've really only been a member for one meeting, or maybe two, I can't remember. So anyway, glad to be with you all.
Great. Well, thanks for moving here, Bob. Let's see, up next, Chris Brown, and then Gary Schaff after that.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Brown. I'm an architect here in Ashland. I've worked in Ashland since 2005 in varying degrees, and started my own practice in 2012. And went to school down at Cal Poly, graduated with architecture in San Luis Obispo and a minor in sustainability, and spent a year abroad in Copenhagen, Denmark as well, researching multifamily housing, and I think some of their approaches towards economy and efficiency in an architectural sense, which, I mean, being, I think, one of the main drivers of global warming, it's definitely a responsibility and something that I feel compelled to assist with navigating in whatever measure possible. It's definitely a big hill to climb, but trying to do the best we can here to help moderate that and find a compromise, I think, in our values as a society here. I was with the Climate Commission version 2.0 and have subsequently then joined the actual commission here as well. It's a great group to be a part of, and I'm glad to see everyone doing well.
So my name's Gary Schaff, and I'm a part of the Climate Policy Committee and serve more particularly on the Built Environment Subcommittee, which developed a pretty ambitious set of objectives or tasks to undertake when we first began our work back late last year, two of which I am hopeful we'll be able to move through and over the course of the next several months, at least out of the policy committee, which are the phase out of gasoline powered lawn and garden equipment, and also the phase out of natural gas powered water heaters. Those two items certainly, in terms of achieving our overall goal of achieving net zero by 2050, we need things explicitly that help us to reduce our emissions. So my background is in land use and transportation planning. Over the course of my career, much of it was spent in the Rogue Valley. I moved here for work in '78 and didn't move to Ashland until 2000, but have thoroughly engaged in our community. And Risa, your allusion to Dick Wanderscheid was kind of interesting. He's a personal friend of mine, and when he learned that I had joined the Climate Policy Committee, he was aghast, largely because he understands the challenges of actually undertaking and successfully implementing productive and effective work in such a setting. And I think that we should all recognize that we face some pretty substantial limitations in terms of what we can go forward with, but at the same time, understanding too that we have great opportunities.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris and Gary. Let's see, next up, let's do James and then Ray.
Okay. It shows I'm on my phone, so I'm kind of in between two systems here. Wow. So I've been involved with the Conservation Commission since 2006 in its early days. I was really, basically I've worked for the forest. I used to work for the Forest Service till about a year ago, 42 years. And the last 5 years of that, of my career, was working with the climate side of things, where we were trying to engage the internal operations of the Forest Service in terms of how to adapt, but more than that, how to build resiliency within the organization, reduce water use, electricity use, et cetera, toward the goal of trying to mitigate climate change impacts. And that had to do with community as well. So, you know, as you know, the Forest Service has outreach into the rural communities all over the nation. And part of our goal was to develop a means of working with local community as well to show what we were doing that might influence them to move forward with mitigation activities as well. So that was my career. In 2006, after watching An Inconvenient Truth, I'm an ecologist by training. I've had this like back in the 70s when I graduated from school, from college. I realized that sustainability was a huge issue, but I kind of went to sleep over the years, not remembering that. It was 2006 when, watching An Inconvenient Truth, that I was reawakened to everything that I thought I had been engaging in, but really wasn't. And so I really, it lit me on fire. I contacted Al Gore. He trained me up along with many other people in the second session of their trainings. And I subsequently put on hundreds of presentations between here in California, Hawaii, Washington, Colorado. And that got me really interested in joining something. Having worked, trying to work nationally, to me was, I was in the Forest Service, being able to do some of that work, but really I wanted to work locally. I felt like we could make more change that way. So I asked to join the Conservation Commission in 2006. And when I did, my focus of attention was the climate change issue. And so a small group of us on the climate change, on the Conservation Commission, put forward the notion, and of course the Conservation Commission bought into it. Ultimately, after a lot of work, bringing that forward and actually developing, hiring on Stu, bringing the plan together. Hiring on Stu is one of those things, which seemed like a mountain climb to do that. And here we are. And I'm so grateful for the work that everybody has done in moving this ball forward in what we need to do. My biggest concern is that, you look outside, you look at what's been exacerbated over the last decade or so, and everything's just going up. Everything, you name it, it's happening. We are in the midst of great change right now in the climate and at a social level. And I would say, to close, Jeff, the only thing I would add to climate change and nuclear is the upcoming artificial intelligence world, because that also is going to have a profound impact on our society and how we operate internally and externally. So I'm proud to be on the Conservation and Climate Outreach Commission. I'm really excited. My want is to find a means of bridging between policy and the work that we do, what our commission does, which is we are trying to work with policies and procedures to educate and advocate for climate recovery goals. That means our role is education. So as policy gets brought forward, or as ideas for what policy could be are brought forward, that we can bridge that gap and bring the two commissions together to be really involved in the community in both deciding what kind of policy is necessary and in working with internally to make that policy come about.
All right, great. Thank you, James. Ray, do you want to have a turn?
Sure. I've met most of you. My name's Ray Millette, either in commission meetings or around town. The only one I haven't met in a commission meeting was Becca. And I don't know if you remember, I met you last February in the Rogue Ski Shop when you were buying some downhill boots. I hope you got a chance to use them.
Yes, I remember now. No, I never got a chance. I did get a chance to ski, but I have not used my new boots yet.
Oh, well, okay. Hopefully this next season.
Hopefully.
Our family moved here from Vermont in 2014. And in leaving Vermont, we were pretty revved up by listening to Bill McKibben and reading his books. And after I retired in 2015 from IBM out here, I joined SOCAN and then got involved with them. And we've been teaching a Master Climate Protector course on climate change for the last 5 years. And also I was a member of the public attending all those seat meetings for 2 or 3 years while that was being put together. And so our family and myself really enjoy hiking and skiing and biking really in the outdoors. So I'm really focused on the climate and the weather changes as well as renewables. So that's why I'm involved in the CPC. And lately I've been working mostly on getting SEEP input into the master plans for the town.
Great. Thank you, Ray. I think we have just Rick and Tanya to go. So unless I missed anybody.
I'll take that as an order then. Let's see. I first became aware of the climate problem when I started, somehow I ran across the IPCC report in the early 90s. And at that time, I was thinking, oh, this is a problem for my grandchildren. And obviously that was not true. It's here now. My personal background is degrees in electrical engineering and computer science. Spent about 22 years in Silicon Valley and then moved here with our kids who finished growing up in Ashland in 2000. So I've been here about 20 years. I was involved with the school district for about a dozen years, mostly on the budget committee and renewing the activities levy and that kind of thing. I've done various other volunteer things around the Rogue Valley since then. As far as climate goes, I wasn't really paying much local attention until I noticed the ad hoc committee that was creating the SEEP plan and went to a few of those meetings, and then ended up working with Steph and others on the so-called SEEP2, the ad hoc committee that sorted out what the responsibilities would be between CPC and CCOC and that sort of thing. And now I have been the vice chair this past year for CPC. Let's see, probably enough.
Great,
Thanks,
so.
Rick. Yeah, Tanya.
So I came to climate work from the conservation world, and I've been working with the organization that, I'm sorry, I'm just getting a little bit of feedback. I've been working with the organization that initially was Headwaters and is now the GEOS Institute for the last 22 years. And in 2006, we kind of did a strategic planning process where we really started to look at what was going to impact natural systems the most in the future. And that's when we developed the community-based resilience program that I do most of my work with now. So during my day job, I help communities address the impacts of climate change by helping them develop climate adaptation and resilience plans. Personally, in 2005, I moved a house. And in that process did, a lot of the work of dealing with how do you upgrade a home's insulation, and how do you, where are the price points for what you invest in to make a home better in terms of the environment and climate. So I'm particularly interested in in housing and how we build those things that will last for a long time, and what policy levers exist for elected officials and people at the state and local level that can have major impacts over time. So I'm interested in pretty much all of the work of the Climate Policy Commission, but specifically around our housing stock and our infrastructure, and how do we make sure that we make good choices now for the future. In terms of the Climate Policy Commission, typically councilors are liaisons to commissions, but with the Climate Policy Commission just getting started last year, the mayor asked me to chair it for a year to help it get up and off the ground. So that year is coming to an end at this upcoming meeting, and at that point I will go back to being a typical liaison. But my goal in this is to work closely with the commission and with our council so that the ideas that are being developed at the commission level are able to be moved on at the council level. That we're bringing information to people in a rapid enough way that they can act on it, and that coordination is really strong there. So that's my main focus, is looking to see what kinds of levers we can pull that are systemic levers, and looking for where we might be able to access funding as a local government, and then connecting the commission to the council.
Super, thanks. Thanks everybody for sharing. So we're looking pretty good on time. I think at this point, let's do just a few minutes update from the Policy Commission about major projects underway, and then we can shift gears and let conservation do the same. Tanya or Rick, I don't know, or someone else, I don't know if you want to share the load here, or we have about 15 minutes set aside for this, for each commission.
Okay, Rick, Rick gave us the presentation at the council meeting, so would you like to give this summary as well?
I can go for it. That's fine. Let's see. Yeah, I think James is actually the only person that hasn't actually heard this before, so I'm going to try to be even more brief than I was last time. The Climate Policy Commission is broken down into 3 different focus areas right now and substitute for subcommittees, but we're hoping to transition back to the subcommittee structure quickly. There is the utilities, the built environment, and administration and planning. The utilities folks are focused, as the name implies, on the import of energy into Ashland, so both the gas and electric. At some point, I hope that we're going to be thinking about gasoline and diesel as well, but that's not on the radar scope right at the moment. Over the short term, that focus group is looking at bringing in representatives from the electric utility in Ashland and Avista, so we can start engaging with them and thinking about how we're going to move forward in a rational fashion. We're also, the utility group is also responsible for trying to fold the SEEP into the comprehensive plan, and the comprehensive plan is a placeholder for a whole set of different kinds of plans, including master plans and capital plans, and it goes on and on. I won't try to list them all because I can't, maybe Stu could. And so just as an example, this past year, the water master plan was updated, and that subcommittee got all the elements of the SEEP into that plan that we thought were necessary. And so that was a great thing. And we're now just deciding what the next steps will be for the comprehensive plan. And then there's the built environment. That is focused around land use planning and transportation planning. Basically, Gary got a pretty good overview of the types of things, both in his personal background, which I had forgotten was so mapped onto this. But basically, if you have delivered energy to the property line from the utilities group, the use of energy at the property, and that includes in the public right-of-ways, is the responsibility of the built environment group. And finally, there's the administration and planning group. So interacting with council, interacting with different commissions, particularly the Climate Outreach and Conservation Commission, and updating the seat, those sorts of things. Basically, everything that's not being done in the other two groups gets lumped into there. Due to lack of bandwidth, we're not doing a whole lot with these random things, but that would include adaptation, just as an example. Sounds good. Thank you, Rick. You've had to do that presentation a few times now, so it's good. The repetition is helpful. I'm getting kind of bored hearing myself, so they're getting shorter and shorter. Well, we'll be on to a new list at some point, hopefully.
I can tell you're chomping at the bit.
Risa and Bex, or Bex, I don't know which of you would like to speak for the conservation.
Shall I kick off, Risa, and you jump in if anything to add? Okay.
Also, if you're not talking, maybe mute your mic, please.
So we had a gap in meetings from February to July, and then we had our first meeting since the pandemic hit in July. And this is where I was voted in as chair, and Risa was voted in as vice chair, and James had been serving as the chair for the past year. So we just discussed, that was very much bringing us back together, seeing everyone after so many months, and discussing where we would start to focus. One thing I was really keen on coming in as chair was to revisit the SEEP, to think about what projects we had been looking at pre-COVID and look at them through the lens of COVID-19, an economic rebuild and building economic resilience in Ashland, and understanding how we as the Outreach Commission could look to our role in delivering SEEP, but then also all of the other strategies across the city of Ashland and what our role is there, and not see climate change and conservation as this separate issue, but very much integrate it within all commissions and all business across Ashland. So no small ask in thinking that. And one thing we started with was to come back in the August meeting and everyone to have looked at the Climate, Energy and Action Plan and propose a number of projects that we could consider that we could do as the commission, and we could discuss and then prioritize and understand where we should focus our efforts. So following that discussion, the members were asked to email me a short summary of each project, linking into Ashland SEEP, the rebuild post-COVID, and building economic resilience. And so, for example, and these are going back for discussion next week at the commission meeting, but for example, on the list at the moment, and these are by no means the final list or prioritized in any way, because we're just starting to explore where we should link in post-COVID and for the economic resilience and linking into other commissions. One is on single-use items. This is an area that the Waste Prevention Subcommittee was very active in pre-COVID. It did take quite a hit during COVID. We've seen more single-use disposables that we didn't even have before in terms of masks and gloves, but this was specifically about the food service industry. And so it's to revisit that through the lens of COVID-19, through the lens of the climate crisis and the fires, and continue to develop a strategy umbrella for Ashland. One is closely linked in terms of the policy commission here, because a number of cities in Oregon do have an ordinance around single-use items. and a number of other cities in America are proposing them. Some states have actually brought in a ban to propose anything to do with plastic, which is very sad, but a lot of cities are going down the route of just trying to address the ones that are completely unnecessary in society. And then there's strategies and frameworks developing across Europe as well. So one thing we thought suited Ashland was to have a package of alternatives. There's no one fix here, and there's no one fix for one individual. So it's understanding it might be that some people want to carry, and I mean, post-COVID, this could very much be a success, that they want to carry cutlery with them. Others really want to be part of Road to Go. So we know that there's different solutions across the board here. And also to go back and look at the ordinance that we were developing, because we had done a lot of research into that. The other idea that came forward was about the biking and cycling infrastructure. So that's seen in a number of plans across Ashland and also closely links to the transportation side of SEEP. Mountain biking in terms of the economy and what it can bring into the economy, but then the cycling infrastructure for active travel, health benefits for people within the city. So to bring that all together and to look at what we can do in terms of outreach, to understand what the barriers are, speak to people that live outside the mountain biking community. Why, are there reasons that they wouldn't embrace this? Are there reasons that they would embrace this? And then the same with the cycling infrastructure. So to get a picture that is across the spectrum of all our citizens, to understand how we could start to progress biking and cycling infrastructure. The other one is climate change resilience in response to the wildfires and COVID, huge events closely linked to climate change. How can we help people feel less vulnerable, and can we do some outreach and education around climate change impacts, resilience in that area? Another idea which I've added to the list because the CPC and the CCOC chairs and vice chairs, we met last week for a discussion, and one thing that came up as a beneficial outreach idea was actually to raise the profile of SEEP and climate change across Ashland with all the commissions. And is this something that our commission could be part of going into these meetings, presenting? Are there any other groups, particularly in the virtual world that we live in now? We can't bring community groups together. We can't advertise that everyone meet at the library for a presentation. We have to actually go into Zoom meetings. So it was, in a way, trying to raise the profile of climate change in that virtual world that we live in. Another idea on the list is water conservation, including around education, also storm drain collection. We have huge demands here at the moment with fire risk, but then we also have the reduced availability around the climate impacts, reduced snowpack, reduced precipitation, and the ongoing drought. So it's linking in again to that climate change resilience, but specifically on water conservation. And then another idea that's been sent to me is to look at pre and post-consumer compost services for commercial and residential citizens, and to do some research in this area. Potentially, could we partner with neighboring communities? And it relates specifically to the consumption part of SEEP. One, we're transporting a huge amount of this biodegradable waste to a landfill, creating greenhouse gas emissions through the transport. Then it's biodegradable, further creating greenhouse gas emissions. And we're also treating it as a waste when that could actually be a product. So that's where the ideas are coming at the moment in terms of the Climate Outreach Commission. Again, to really keen that we focus on the delivery of the SEEP and support Ashland in doing that. Look at the economic resilience that we need and start integrating climate change so it's not this separate issue. So we're discussing them at the next meeting, and that's probably on our status at the moment. Risa, do you have anything to add?
I think that what I would add, that I don't know if the CPC is aware, just throwing out some projects that we had been involved with in the last couple of years with working with water conservation helping to host tours of rainwater catchment, laundry to landscape, opportunities for citizens, and then the bottle and can collections downtown, in the downtown area, was a pilot that was kind of a easy little baby step that I hope we will be able to expand into the future. Just, but you know, those are kind of action. And just to add to that, over the years and continuing to the present, what's now the Conservation and Climate Outreach Commission has had a spot in the sneak preview every month called Conservation Corner, and we're rekindling that for the new month. At just if it's something that y'all aren't aware of, just to let you know, just kind of examples of the kind of outreach and baby steps that we are involved with. And Rogue to Go, which we launched in January of 2020. So.
Yeah, I might also mention, Gary, to you about we started at one point, and it kind of fell apart somewhere along last year, was working with air quality. And we were working with trying to bring, in particular, landscape tools, that type of thing, into the electric world. That kind of terminated, but I think there's maybe some good overlap there we might have a conversation about too in the future.
Thanks, Gene.
That is definitely something. I was just responding to James's positively to his suggestion.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. It's good to check in and just have a sense of what's happening. I know we're sort of following each other already, but it's nice to bring everybody into this one space for this. So because this is just kind of informal meeting, chairs and I came up with a couple of questions just to sort of chat about. And I leave it to you folks to decide if you want to like go around in an order or if you just want to speak in whatever turns you like. But let's just try this. Just for they kind of go together, I think, to do the first two questions and then maybe the second two questions, you know, side by side. So if anybody is feeling like they want to go first, do this right now. Okay, Jeff, great. So I'll just, for the sake of the video recording, the first question is, what is the impact of 2020 events on our climate work? I think that's a pretty big question. And then secondly, moving forward, what's going to be different, if anything, for us, for the community? Open question. Jeff, please take it away.
Well, I think first and foremost, it underlines the urgency of the work that these two groups are doing. And then I would say second, it probably should make us look again a little harder at adaptation, because it's really obvious right now, like several of you have said, that like Rick, we're right in the middle of it right now. So how do we adapt short term? Like I'm a Firewise coordinator for, you know, our neighborhood here in Ashland, and I really think this is going to get, you know, my neighborhood a lot more energized about doing work to mitigate and reduce wildfire damage. So it's urgent and it's happening right now.
Great. Yeah, I think it'd be great to hear from everybody on all these questions. So just flag your hand and take the next spot. I think I saw Bob and then Risa.
I was just kind of keying off of, I wasn't going to necessarily answer the question, but keying off of what Jeff said, I think it really has heightened a lot of awareness. And I think that we'll see a lot more interest from people in Ashland in doing something. So I think our challenge is going to be how to communicate to the broader community. I think the city has a lot of challenges to communicate to the broader community. The conservation, it's conservation and climate outreach. So I'm really interested in hearing some of what you all have learned over the years and trying to really outreach and really communicate, and then not just communicate one way, but then bring people in, because I think there is a lot of interest and there's going to be more interest because of this in getting involved, and how we channel that energy and into productive work rather than just swirling around, and being realistic about some of the priorities that we can set. So I think it's a huge opportunity. I think going back to the question, I guess what's changed is I think there's a huge opportunity. There's always a huge opportunity when there's a crisis, and I think this is it's a pretty big crisis for our relatively small, community. So it's I think there's a huge opportunity for us to really engage more people if we're smart about it. So I think there's a lot of work for both of us working together, and we should figure out how we can do that, really tightly.
Risa, then James.
So as soon as, while Stu was asking the question about what is different for 2020 in terms of how it may impact what we're doing, a bold-faced, large font word popped into my head, and that word is action. Actionable steps that we can take. We've done a lot of talking and a lot of theorizing, and I think, though, an important piece is that we reassess some of our actionable, maybe I'm contradicting myself, but I think it's really important to reassess prior goals and make sure that we are really dialed in light of COVID, in light of the fires that exploded last week, that if we'd been asleep, I'm pretty sure we might have woken a little bit. Just the importance of not skipping over low-hanging fruit as we organize ourselves and create actionable plans for today and tomorrow.
Great.
Thanks,
James.
Rita. And yeah, thanks too. Rebecca, I really applaud you for bringing that notion of COVID into the picture around economics right now. And I think it's an extremely important, okay, so 2020, right? That's COVID, right? Well, also smoke, like fires, that's been a prevalent issue with us in the last, especially the last number of years. And we're seeing it get worse and worse and worse. So fire affected OSF in a big way a couple of years ago, a couple of years before that, shut down. All kinds of things happening right now to our community in terms of tourism, what we've relied on for a long time. If there's, and then we have COVID on top of all this, where we have to go virtual, right? And how do we reach out to the community in a virtual way? How can we use that as a lever, if you will, for us to step into other things? And one way, and I think Rebecca, you mentioned it, was interfacing with other commissions, which could be really powerful. And in doing so, reaching out virtually to the community in other forums. So if we can capture what other things are happening in the community right now and bring ourselves into that forum by having a voice in a virtual way, that could be very useful. I personally feel impacted by the weather, by COVID, by just the social, and not economic for me because I'm retired, but the social impact of it has been great. And I see this as an opportunity, and that's where I would love to see our commissions come together and brainstorm some methods of doing that between policy and the actual outreach to communities in 2021 in this case.
Thanks, James. Ray, and then next.
Okay. A couple of things came to mind for me for 2020 of what you've been mentioning. Earlier, Becca talked about water conservation. I think that's going to be really important going forward. Just reading about how difficult it's been for TID and how low the reservoirs are getting, and they're really counting on a big rainfall year. And the outlook, at least through the end of this year, is that's not going to happen. And so I think there's going to need to be a big focus on water conservation. And I know Ashland just put in curtailment level 1. And when I read that level, I was very surprised at how high that was. That's about 3 times what I normally use when I'm irrigating. So I think there's some opportunity there to really cut down on our water use. The other thing is, with all the fires and smoke, I think we could really use education of Ashland and surrounding Jackson County through maybe our website. So there's some work there, and I know there's people that want to get involved to help broaden our website in terms of education, because there's a lot of things going on now about what is causing climate change and what we should do about our forests. I think it would be nice to be able to show people where to go to get the right scientific-based information, especially being community-based, so that it's coupled with actions that we're doing in our community. And the last thing is as we're looking to rewrite the SEEP this year, we have the Oregon Executive Action from Brown. I think we could align some of our goals with the same thing that she's doing, so that statewide across the cities, we have the same goals in terms of reducing our greenhouse gases.
Yeah, everything that's been said, I completely agree with. As someone that's worked in climate change policy and resource management policy for 2 decades now, I would say it was probably this year that I started communicating it differently. And that was the impact from COVID-19 and the relationship that has to climate change. And then from just last week, it's challenged me so much. For someone that's worked in this field, and I mean, all of you related to it too, but we're now seeing impacts that, it's like we're choking this planet in a way. So then to articulate it to people, they're struggling to deal with it, and it's really challenged my communication. I think that is an opportunity right now. We should say we have to get how we articulate this so right, because what I'm saying, the difference from this year to previous years is that I guess I've always been the policy language. It's been influencing the government. I worked for the EPA in Scotland, so it was about working with stakeholders that were generally trying to come together and develop that policy. It wasn't about how, it wasn't about people owning that policy, understanding it and changing the way they live, understanding how we change the systems. And so the opportunity for me in the events that we've faced in Ashland is it makes it so real that you want to understand what action, what it actually means to you personally. It's not about that climate neutral by 2050, because that's just this unfathomable high level thing. It's about how what I do contributes to that, and how can I be part of a different system. And so that to me is the impact of 2020, and how we as the commissions have to challenge ourselves how we articulate that. And I think that's a really important thing to take away in terms of our outreach. COVID, fire, water use, it's all making it so real. And I think definitely in terms of resilience and adaptation, so people feel less vulnerable, but feel, that they're empowered, that you can adapt, but at the same time, we need to mitigate. And when people ask that question, but we're a tiny little city and there's a whole global population, it will be it will be smaller cities that show a difference how it can be done, and people will learn from that. There'll be technology transfer, knowledge transfer, and we do have to find a better way here.
Steph, are you raising your hand?
My history is in behavior modification, at least in part. And what I see is trying to take the big picture and trying to chunk it down into behaviors that we want to see in our citizens and our government, and help people prioritize that so they don't become overwhelmed, and help them build success kind of one step at a time so that they see progress. I personally was concerned about having a climate change goal that was a percentage of climate change per year versus actions, and looking at whether some things could be cumulative. As a citizen, I've had a hard time sometimes knowing which thing to do first. Do I get a heat pump first, or do I look at the need for changing my outside environment? So helping people develop a plan that includes all of those aspects of consumption, of changing the built structure that they're living in, with the steps to be successful with that. That's something that I'm very interested in. In terms of 2020 and how that's impacted us, I see I come from a political place in part because I'm on the council. I'm concerned about the next election. I'm concerned about looking at budget versus not diminishing the programs that we have that I think are important to climate change in the personnel that are. So, so that's a personal issue for me, is my concern about what happens with the next election, both locally and nationally.
So when I look at it, I think, you know, the obvious pieces, and we've talked about those, are COVID and the fires. But the other piece I think that's coming into this is also just all the racial justice work that's been happening, and that bigger conversation that is happening in this country. And I don't know that we're going to ever go back. I certainly hope that we don't go back to sort of the complacency that existed before in communities like Ashland. But what I see is that there have been a couple of interesting things that, in terms of COVID, you know, COVID launched all of us out into this type of meeting, into virtual conversations, in a process that, if left to our own devices, probably would have taken us a decade or longer for people to get comfortable meeting like this. And I think that it creates some new opportunities for engagement for people who wouldn't be necessarily so keen to go down to a public forum space, but maybe they are more comfortable doing this. So I think there are some interesting things coming out of it. And locally, you know we have to redesign our economy, both in terms of what kind of visitors do we invite here, and are we trying to attract here? And then also, what is the rest of our economy outside of our visitor economy? And in those decisions and in that redesign, I think there are really interesting possibilities for a lot of the work that we want to do, for renewable energy, for dealing with our housing stock, for electric vehicles, for how we do our visitor economy. All of that, I think, if we set a course that includes good climate work, now is really the time to start to put that out and into motion. I think there's also the urgency, you know, in the conversation in the climate world, really, even locally, up until last week, up until the hurricanes hit the southeast and the fires hit the west, the conversation was, how do we get people to think about climate again? because right now the whole world is COVID. And even though there's a link to climate, it's not an obvious one to a lot of people. And is our climate work going to be able to come back with all the economic hits that local governments and everybody else are taking? And, you know, and as we've seen, I think the climate change is going to keep putting itself back in the front of us with these kinds of issues and disasters. And so I think there is a momentum here, and it's a window that we have to catch locally coming in behind the fires, where we have to take action before we get to the point where we've got what we sometimes call disaster amnesia in the resilience world, where we've gotten a little too far away from the disaster to really feel compelled to act. And so I think that our commissions have challenges, certainly, because we know the financial situation of the city government, but also there is real momentum behind taking action and putting Ashland on a course that's different than where it was. And so I think it's been a hard hit year, but like Bob, I would agree that there is opportunity in that hit, and it's just a matter of how can we marshal what we need to do and take advantage of it.
Why don't you run for mayor, Tanya?
That's Rick and then Chris.
Okay, I want to build on some things that people have said. I fully agree that there's opportunity in disaster, even if it seems a little twisted to think that way. So I just want to agree with that. But then I also want to build on something that Steph said, which was behavioral modification. And so here's a random concrete thing I just want to throw out there, but we can't debate this to a conclusion. There have been a lot of studies about what actually moves people to take action. And the most effective mechanism is seeing what their neighbors do. For example, if you go down a block and all of a sudden there is a set of photovoltaic panels that can be seen from the street, that's the best indicator that they will sprout on a lot of roofs in that neighborhood. So the random idea is what I would like to see, because I'd like to see us focus on electrify Ashland as a mantra, that's what comes to everybody's lips sometime this next year, is to have the council modify the sign ordinance just a little bit so that you can have a sign in front of every building that indicates what its electrification status is. Whether it's space heating is electrified, whether there are EV chargers and EVs in the home, whether the water heaters have been changed, and go down the whole list of things that need to be electrified. Because I think those sorts of concrete indicators that people will see every time they get out of their house is one of the best ways to modify behavior.
Can I just make a comment, just really quick? I think it's really important that we incentivize the behavior that we want to see. Just supporting what you said, Rick.
Yeah, that was actually part of the study that I was quoting from. Those sorts of incentives help, but it's actually not the strongest indicator. What your neighbors do matters a lot more.
All right.
I think one thing that I've seen.
Yeah,
sorry,
Chris.
Stu, I didn't want to interrupt. I've been questioning a lot about our affordances and sort of what we view as like affordances in our society and our culture as a given. I think this year has definitely challenged that on many levels. I like to see it as for better rather than worse, namely like air traffic. I think what we saw in the kind of 3 months post-March or quarantine, I guess, and pollution levels and subsequent decline in air traffic and vehicular traffic as well, I think challenged a lot of assumptions that we as a culture held sacred in some way, as if nothing could have an impact that quickly, and it certainly did. In that regard, I feel like forecasting on a level of behavior, if we can look at certain behaviors that are implicit in our day-to-day and get a sense of what those curves or impacts might be, and then I don't necessarily have an answer to that, but also then looking at how radical the swing was, and obviously I think that's the nature. There always will be a counterforce, or there will be a swing. In this instance, I think the fire pollution now is obviously offsetting those 3 months of incredibly clear skies that we all experienced. I mean, I just could tell in day-to-day air quality the improvement, and it did feel like the Earth was responding to that reduction in travel and subsequent human impact. While everyone, granted, I think humanity was affected on psychological levels from the quarantine. Although another thing I feel like is really important is for us to, it's hard for us to not see everything through the eyes of our own human experience here. But if we are actually on an extinction trend right now, and I don't want to sound morbid here, but and it's debatable if it's even reversible at this point, right? I mean, I like to believe it is, but I also want to just posit the idea that if we are on an extinction curve, how do we want to leave the Earth, or what contributions do we have here to give? And I have a hard time thinking that global population will be decimated. I like to look at it in terms of I would say it's more of a balancing act, right? And if there is an adjustment that occurs, where are our values, and how do we perceive those values in relationship to a global perspective, as well as a micro, a local perspective too. I think that looking at both those things.
Gary?
I kind of wanted to follow up. Certainly Tanya and Stephanie are sensitive to this issue, but the council and the city's budget are both under increasing stress because of all the various problems and issues that we've experienced over the past 6 months. And we'll have increasingly, I think, a difficult time getting them to focus on the issues that we, I think, collectively want to see moved forward. And I think that will be a huge challenge, but more immediately, we know, or at least I know, that the water heater replacement subsidy that the city had planned to launch this summer was set aside or postponed. I'm not really even sure if it's coming back on the burner anytime in the future, but certainly the administrative decision not to launch that program as planned has implications for the work that we do. And we need to figure out how we can keep our programs, our initiatives on track and moving forward, despite the challenges that the city council faces on a myriad of different issues. Somehow we need to bring them to the critical importance of climate change. Further, I would just like to comment that the COVID-19 experience has clearly indicated to everyone that working from home is probably going to be more prevalent in the future than we would have even anticipated 6 months ago. There are some forecasts that 60% of employment will be from home in the next 20 years, which really, for me at least, emphasizes the critical importance of Ashland making quality of life its kind of go-to strategy in terms of developing our economy and sustaining our way of life. And that is clearly the path forward, and to the degree that we ignore it is a detriment not only to the citizens who live here now, but also to those who might choose to live here in the future.
James?
I really appreciate that, Gary. It gets me to just remember really toward the beginning of this whole process of trying to put together, to actually get a plan put together, how much front-end work it took. It actually took 10 years to get to the point, 2016-17, where we actually were moving the momentum forward to finally put a plan together. And I remember working with city council and the kind of issues that I can't imagine what it's like to sit on city council and have to be dealing with, such a diversity of issues, especially in economic hard times. How can we as our commissions bring ourselves forward through the community? Because, kids or whatever, kids make a change, whatever it is that the community can become involved in, to really bring the community into this mix to actually have the kind of influence that we really need on city council for all members, to, especially in light of the new elections that are coming on. We don't know what the makeup of the council will be, and the issues that we'll be up against in terms of economics and what you were talking about, Gary, even the refrigerator subsidy. Was that what it was?
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's hot water heater.
Hot water heater. So all of those things
heater
take a back burner, so to speak, to the problems that are right in the face of everybody. But if there's a way we can bring community into this, and what you're saying, Becca, with regards to how we can tie this into the economic side of COVID and where things are happening there, and bring it back to city council as an opportunity rather than as a carrot rather than a stick, then we have a much better chance of making progress that way.
Great. Well, it's good discussion. Maybe Steph and Tanya, and then we maybe pivot to the other questions, if that's okay with you folks.
I see another thing that is happening is more regional connections with talent and Phoenix having so much damage, rebuilding and trying to integrate our region and fit it together more in terms of, looking at fire and fire districts and how we can work together more. I think there's that opportunity now because of what happened with the fires. Another thing I'm doing is I'm starting to work with a student at Aptos about enhancing youth involvement in the political system and looking at changing the city council, kids being able to vote at the city level when they're 16, to try to get kids connected more with what's happening. A lot of for me, some of the most important things with it were what the youth had to say, the kids that were involved. I really think that made a difference in terms of what the council did and in terms of adopting seats. So I'm hoping that getting younger people more involved is important too.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add to that is I think that there will be some challenges. I would agree, Gary, in terms of what all the city council has to focus on, but there are some really important areas of overlap. And so, for instance, the Climate Policy Commission has focused heavily on electrification, and one of the benefits of that is that we actually get money in our general fund from people's electric utility bills. And so the more that people use electricity, the more that electric users tax supports our general fund. And so when we, at whatever point the Climate Policy Commission comes forward with electrification options and things that we want to do with electrification, that reality of that funding stream and the benefit to that funding stream has to be part of that conversation, because that wherever we can tie some of the current issues like the economy or the hit to the general fund or any of those things to the work that we are doing on these commissions, it will have I think a much more positive, it will be responded to in a more positive way. But right now we have strong support on the Council for climate work. What I've found is that, you know, we all have our own areas of expertise or our particular areas of interest. And so there are, you know, a certain number of people who bring forward different types of perspectives that, and then the Council kind of moves in that direction. It's amenable to moving in that direction. And so I think we've got really good, strong support at the Council level. But the work that we do at the Commission level, I think, needs to bear in mind the different priorities that the Council is juggling at the moment, and to find those intersections and put things forward where those intersections are happening. And then I think we can do quite a lot in the near term, as long as we keep that focus and that frame.
Bex, did you have a last word to add?
I just had a comment on what Stephanie was saying about having younger people involved. This has happened a lot in Scotland. There's a Climate 2050 group, and they also lowered the age of voting to 16. And there's great examples of what youth has done with Scottish Parliament in challenging the ministers. So if you'd like further information on that, if that's any help at all, and the benefits that have come with it, I'd be happy to provide that as well.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right. Well, thanks for the discussion. I think I took a few like super crude notes while I was trying to watch and type and do this. So maybe that'll be useful later. But we do have the recording here, so we can revisit that as needed. So next question, I think this is something that's come up in both groups to one degree or another, is, you know, the commissions as designed are hopefully able to operate independently and not be too bogged down or constrained by the other. However, there are clearly some opportunities for both commissions to work in tandem. Third question, are there specific projects or topic areas that you folks think would require both commissions to be actively involved? And I know this is kind of a fuzzy one, but if anything comes to mind, maybe everybody wants to pick one or two things and just throw it out there. I can kind of keep a list. We could revisit it as needed. Reese is first.
So part of the way that I think about this is that thinking about all the commissions collectively and our commission's collective responsiveness and integration with the Climate Energy Action Plan. And so I guess my first response is really looking at the larger picture, and then looking at the smaller picture that is specific to what the Climate Policy Commission does and what the Conservation Commission does. I guess I'm putting in a plug for really wanting our commissions to be more effective and more accountable and more sensitive to what the overall plan of SEEP and accomplishing it, because we really can't get where we want to go until we figure out pathways, kind of like a tree's root system, with one another to work together to accomplish the goals in the Climate Energy Action Plan.
Okay. So I don't know if this captures it, but I wrote down integrating SEEP into other commissions' work. Is that?
Every commission's work.
Yeah, all the other commissions is work. Yeah. Okay.
So I kind of evaded the specific question and just kind of, I just wanted it out there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anybody else? James, then Jeff.
I think I said this before, but maybe I haven't. But I know Jeff, you've been a project manager. I've been a project manager, and I really like putting together a plan that could be used by both commissions to move the ball forward, say from whatever policies that the policy commission are working on and putting together, and how the workflow might be for us as the Conservation and Climate Outreach Commission to take that in part and bring it to the public, or involve the public prior to policy request from, say, City Council, and build that project plan so that we're truly integrated in the way that we move through things, and then hold ourselves accountable for those meeting those milestones in order to move that next step forward through a well thought out process that, as we know, in any project plan, things change, but to be able to set that stage for us to be able to move that, walk that through as both commissions in a more cohesive and coordinated way.
I think that's a good point. We could, for example, put together project plans with Gantt charts and schedules and things like that. I think it would be helpful. From my perspective, hearing the discussion here today, is that we need, I certainly need more one-on-one conversations with the people in this virtual room here. There's a few things, James, I'd love to talk to you about. Rebecca, likewise, and there's to identify these areas of overlap and figure out how we can help each other move forward. But definitely agree that maybe a little bit more of a structured approach would help in that communication.
Okay, I saw Gary, Rick, and Ray. I think I saw Rick.
And Stephanie too.
You're muted, Gary.
James, one of the things that the Built Environment Subcommittee has worked on is the phase out of gas-powered lawn and garden equipment. And that includes within that overall strategy a stepwise effort to eliminate different pieces of equipment at different timeframes. And clearly, should that approach be endorsed by the full CPC, then at that juncture, it seems like the outreach efforts could begin to work on how does that look, how do we really manage that process and manage that transition from gas-powered to electric-powered equipment. And I think I can speak for the entire CPC and say that we would welcome that collaboration in that effort.
Gary, that's a great specific example, yes. And we could build that into somehow between the two commissions, a work plan, if you will, for how we would accomplish that.
Precisely.
Can I just ask a question on that and turn it on its head? Because I don't necessarily see the flow going policy outreach. I think outreach is part of policy. So I was wondering how we can be involved in, and you might have already done this, in terms of coming up with the decisions of the policy. Are we getting the outreach? Are you getting the outreach support you need at that point to help? Because sometimes what is there and the buy-in and how that policy developed is absolutely integral to the very success of the implementation. And so being handed a policy and then taking it out to the community that haven't helped be part of that development, we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure. So it's not necessarily a handover, or I don't necessarily see it as a, I think each commission to have a plan, a structured framework, I think is so important. But if we start then realizing which commissions have to have a joint plan and a joint structure, I think we're gonna get tied up in more plans and bureaucracy when we want action. And that's coming from someone who's I'm very much advocating efficiency and structure in our own commission, because I do think there's room for improvement at the moment. But I was just wondering, it's not just how we work together, but it's also how we work with all the commissions in terms of embedding climate change across them all. So yeah, just going back to my first question, Gary, the outreach at the policy stage, can you talk a little bit more about that in terms of the gas?
Bob, you want to take that one?
What's that?
I was going to hand that question off to Bob. I think he's got a pretty good insight in terms of how that internal and external stakeholder process might work.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure I'm quite ready for that. But I mean, I do think that you can't just design something in a back room and then kind of roll it out and say everybody's going to do it. It doesn't work that way. A politician once told me that if you want to land together, you've got to take off together.
That's a good phrase.
Yeah, you can't just land the plane, and everybody's with you. They got to be on the plane when you take off. So I think we do have to find ways to iterate and to engage the population. I think that's one of the opportunities. I think we have lots of opportunities right now, but I think one of the opportunities we've got is people are interested. People are taking notice. People are at least on adaptation, and I think there's too much of a stretch to go from adaptation to mitigation as well. But it's, obviously they're different things. I think we've got a way to engage the interest of the public. And I think that the city's role, I think the way we were thinking of it in terms of the lawn and what is it called? The small engines, gas powered small engines, is really using the city as kind of a demonstration. So the city does its work first, and then it shows how others can do it. And I think that because the city is not really much of a contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, it's a couple percent of the total emissions of Ashland, but it is, it's got to walk its talk, and it can demonstrate how it can be done, and it can collect data on how much it costs and how much you can do, and those kinds of things. To do that, I think the two commissions have to be working, completely hand in glove about getting our interaction with the population, tight and, correct, and not crossing messages and things. I would like to step back a little bit on that, because I think we've only had one meeting, I think, since we've started meeting again since the paralysis with the COVID. Since March. And I think we're going to be meeting tomorrow. And one of the topics on our agenda, we heard at the last meeting, that one of our big focuses is going to be on electrifying Ashland. That's what Rick mentioned. And that's completely fired my imagination too. I think it is totally possible to take lots of steps to electrify Ashland. It is a good thing for the city. It is a good thing for, the people who live in the city. It'll save people money. People, convert from gas to electricity. It'll save on their heating and utility bills over the longer period, if we can get the financing right. The financing for the upfront costs. There has to be, a switching. There's also opportunities in talent in Phoenix right now, because there's going to be building, and it would be a real shame if they rebuild with oil, furnaces and natural gas furnaces. There's got to be an opportunity there as well. There's all kinds of economic opportunity that's going to be, there's going to be a stimulus here, an economic stimulus with the rebuilding. That's what happens after a disaster, not to put it crudely, but that's something that's going to power things, and that we need to try to figure out how we can shape the way the rebuilding happens. And I think one of those messages is electrification. The other big message I think we have to be working on goes along with adaptation, and much of that is conservation, and that's what you guys are doing. The water conservation is a huge thing. You know, the fire obviously is not quite conservation, but there's some messages that kind of go along the same lines. And I think I'm kind of going off because I'm getting too excited, but I think the other thing that we have to make sure we don't leave out is that, you know, our most vulnerable neighbors. Those were the ones who were hit the hardest in this fire. I mean, it's just heartbreaking, you know, that this fire kind of came through and decimated, you know, I mean, not just the poorest, but they're, you know, very, very poor mobile home parks. That is just a terrible, terrible, you know, thing that happened. And we've got to find a way in all of this to rebuild in a way that actually can make people who have lower incomes, you know, better off with electricity, with, you know, more resilient, better siting on the property that they rebuild on, so they can put solar panels on, so they can reduce some of their costs of energy, so that they can, you know, why not electric cars? So I think there's going to be a lot of financing for that sort of thing, and we should be thinking really big and forward, and really engaging everybody in the community, because we've got so many people that know so much about so many of these topics. Yeah. It's not just us, thank God, because we know very little. It's really the whole community. So anyway, I'll stop. I've gotten too excited.
I'm going to zoom us back out for a second. We're down to about 20 minutes, so let's just call it 15. I think we had project suggestions from Rick, from Ray, from Steph. I saw a few other hands too, but let's go those three first.
Okay, this is going to be just hopefully focusing, but building on it, what has already been said. I would like us, you know, there was a proposal for doing planning and figuring out what the missions do, and that kind of, the intent was to try to make them as independent as possible. And I agree with that. I think what might be useful is to take a specific project, electrify Ashland, vision of labor might look like. For example, right now, there's no particular reason why CCOC couldn't go out with the incentives that are in place right now and make things happen by communicating with the community. And then as more things, and we could flesh this out at some point, what we mean, but on-bill financing is an example. There's already been a lot of discussion at CPC about what these things might be. And so a one-page document that
Oh, we lost you, Rick.
Back. We got you at one-page document, that cliffhanger. Oh, and you're muted.
Yeah, okay. It could have been me, but I'm not sure what happened. Anyway, let me go on from there. I don't want to go on in any more detail. I'm just suggesting that there's a happy medium between working independently and trying to work so closely that we're tripping over each other. And if the chairs sorted this out, we could get a one-page document that is an example of how we divide responsibilities. And I find using something like Electrify Ashland as a starting point helps make it concrete rather than hand waving.
Can I just comment on that?
Real quick.
Okay, so based on what Bob was saying and Rick was saying, and having that structure, I completely agree. If you take one thing like electrification and have an outcome-based plan, you're far more likely to achieve than bringing us all together to develop a plan together. So yeah, we should take the projects where there are those areas that complement each other, focus on the outcome and then the different roles. And to me, it wouldn't just be the CPC and the CCOC. It would actually help identify all the stakeholders that we need, from nonprofits, other community groups, students, businesses that we can ask to take a lead and to really advocate what we're trying to achieve and have that from the beginning. So have an outcome-based plan would be far more beneficial than, yeah, I think getting too tied up in who does what on a plan. To me, our joint plan is the seat. That's what we're advocates here for.
All right. Thank you, Bex. Let's do Ray and then Steph, I think. Is that what the order was?
Okay, this is sort of continuing the flow that has started here. I was thinking similar to Rick that we should take one or two projects, and what's important is what is the end goal we want, and then what groups need to be involved to achieve that. And it goes back to what Jeff was saying about a Gantt chart, you know, so you can start with something like that. So I think between our two commissions, we can come up with a list of 10 things each of us are working at. And there could be 4 or 5 that are overlapped heavily, and there's 2 or 3 that aren't at all. We should focus on those in the center and do 1 or 2 of them as an example and work through this sort of project plan. What commissions would have to be involved, or what members of the public would have to be involved to achieve that goal. Another one could be water conservation.
All right, Steph and then Tanya.
An overriding goal of all of this is a livable Ashland. Everything that all of the commissions are doing are trying to achieve that goal. So I think that how, you know, sometimes I wonder whether there should have been one commission with different subgroups working on different things in terms of staff times, in terms of integrating policy flowing to the outcomes and buy-in. I think I see how this impacts planning, transportation, human services, and all of that is livability, and all of that I think needs to be connected somehow together. I see this as this could be kind of an overarching concept that all commissions develop goals towards that bigger goal.
Mm.
Yeah, you know, I think that that's an interesting conversation. And Steph, you've been talking for a long time about the need for us as a city to revisit our whole commission structure. And I think in that, which I'm certainly is on my list for next year as soon as our budgeting process is done, that may be a conversation that we have about these two commissions, with the idea in my mind that it's a bigger commission than what most commissions are. There's just way too much work to be able to be done by one standard sized commission. So I think that these are some interesting ideas. In the meantime, I think we have talked at the Climate Policy Commission about that need for buy-in and stakeholder engagement. And I could kind of see maybe a process whereby you all on the Conservation and Climate Outreach Commission are doing that work on those SEEP elements that are already in place, the incentive programs that are there, and you kind of have a consistent public outreach element around that. The Policy Commission is picking off specific policies, and what we talked about in the CPC is that starts with the idea of what are we after, and then we reach out to those stakeholders that will be the most affected in small one-on-one small group conversations. And then once we kind of get it shaped of what would be the best thing to put forward that maybe wouldn't create that immediate backlash, right, from the people who are most impacted. Once it starts to take shape, then there's that wider public education and actual engagement feedback loop that has to be put in place. Once it's refined, the policy component is refined, goes to council, hopefully is passed by council, then it's entirely an outreach effort, right? And so there is kind of it's a handoff, but it's almost like a relay race where both runners are still running together for a little while, right? There's kind of, it's a handoff, but it's not a clean one, in that one side's work completely ends when the other one starts. And so I think, you know, that I would like to see, I think Ray mentioned that, you know, maybe we take a couple of these, maybe we try that out, that process out with whatever these first policy elements are that are coming from CPC. And then I also see the SEEP update next year as being one of those places where we need to be doing both the background sort of policy analysis, but also community engagement in whatever way that looks like with the COVID world. Maybe it's going to look like today looks, but you know, that is going to need a major engagement element too, just like the last one did. So, I mean, those are the places I think that we could really do a lot of good work together. And I know, Stu, you've got your new intern who's working on the website. And so I think that there are new avenues for that engagement that are hopefully going to be coming online soon.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. James, I saw your hand go up.
Yep, thanks, Stu. You know, we were talking about, it's been mentioned a couple times about involvement with other commissions, and we've talked about our involvement with other commissions over the years and how that might take place. I'm wondering, this is a question maybe to the CPC in terms of perhaps coming up with an idea of a policy that would, and this could dovetail, Stephanie, with you as well, and your thoughts about how commissions work together or restructuring commissions, that one of the elements of whatever comes out of the restructuring is that the seat itself has a home in each of the charters of each commission, so that it becomes relevant to that commission's operation, and those commissions are held accountable by City Council to work on the appropriate SEEP goals toward resolution of toward actionable items in the for both mitigation and adaptation.
Great, thank you, James. Does anybody have obvious project ideas that hasn't spoken that would like to speak, that would touch both commissions? Okay, Gary, give you the last word.
I have spoken, certainly integrating the SEEP into the city's comprehensive land use plan is an area which is of critical importance to everyone in the city, and certainly to the conservation as well as the policy committee. So there's clearly an overlap there that we need to be working on and collaborating.
Agree, yes. So we are at 4:53 by my clock. We have one last question, which is kind of it's not a throwaway question, it's an important question, but I don't know that it merits quite as much discussion. If so, we can have another meeting, the other game. But I was just curious to address to this group, you know, what are some tools that the two commissions can use to keep in touch with each other, because there's always more that can be done to cross-pollinate. And I think I'll just jump in with a few suggestions initially, which is reading the minutes of the other climate commission, but also, you know, all the commissions that you might be interested in. They really are an accurate and detailed record of everything that's happening, and it takes a lot of time. But it's the best way to know what people are working on. The other thing I just would mention is that I think both of these commissions, Elizabeth, if you're listening, you can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think both of these commissions have a slot on the agenda for updates from other commissioners. So someone not on that commission that is a commissioner. So you all could attend each other's meetings and have a few minutes, not more than that, to give a quick update about what's going on in your group, if you so desire. It's not a discussion point, but it's an opportunity to come and say, hey, our commission worked on this really cool thing. We just wanted you to know, or we wanted you to take some action after that. So
There's still a question on that. So is that informal? You just notify the chair maybe before the meeting, or how are we supposed to work
think
that?
that's how it's intended to work. Is you should alert the chair before the meeting or at the meeting. We don't have a really strict policy about it like city council meetings, but there is typically a space there, preferably for only one person from each commission. And it's not like an official liaison thing. It's just a space that we created for other commissions to come in and give a quick broadcast. So I think I saw also James and Gary. Yeah, go ahead.
To answer, I hope I'm answering your question. I think that a way of communicating between commissions on what's going on, I'm talking about all the commissions, not just between the two of us. I go back to my project planning days, and if there were something, Stu, that we had that commissions were responsible for putting in their actions, the kinds of things they're doing into a larger context that would show Commission X, Y, and Z are working on these projects. And just a simple summary of what the project is, what their goals are, and when their outcomes and their desired outcomes and the dates that they're trying to accomplish that. I think would be really helpful as a kind of at a glance, to be able to see what other commissions are doing in a nutshell without having to parse through all the notes of all the different commissions. You know, those are good things too, but something that every commission is required to enter in what they're doing at any given time so that it's viewable by the public, but also by us as different commissions.
Yeah, I think there's a big opportunity for written reports from all corners of the community. That's certainly what we do in a lot of peer groups. It's been hard to enforce the written reporting amongst volunteer commissions, but I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, this wouldn't be so much of a written report, you know, because that's one way of getting the information out, but more of a thing that each commission in their charter is required to do is to kind of summarize what they're doing in a very succinct way so that it's easily seen by others and more questions could be asked.
Yeah, noted. Okay, maybe one more person and then we should wrap it up here because I'm going to end right at 5. Anybody else? Risa.
So one of the things that I wanted that I think is important for us as the two commissions is to quarterly gather, one day in person, but in a Zoom, you know, with a focused goal, whether it's, you know, reporting what we're doing, wanting input from one another, just kind of make it a part of how we function. And as far as the other commissions go, I also think that once or twice a year, I'm looking forward to some kind of a redo with some of the activities of the city, say when the mayor gives the state of the address or whatever, but you turn it into an action event that includes brief reporting, but it also brings the commissioners together and the community for I don't know what the language is, but it would have a specific, you know, you walk around at different tables and you give your input on different projects, and we are just for a few minutes connected and understand and can hear the different highlights of what we're each doing and how we are supporting our common goal.
Thanks, Risa. You know, this has been actually really interesting to talk to everybody and see you all in one space. But we are also at 5 o'clock almost, so I do not want to keep anybody longer than necessary. Would you all, I guess, it sounds like we may be doing something like this again. Certainly there's a lot of opportunities for the two groups to meet. And I'd encourage anybody who wants to individually connect to please do that. There's certainly no prohibition on that. And in this COVID time, it's pretty easy to zoom it up and get to know your neighbors from a comfortable distance. And then I guess I just wanted to thank everybody who came today. And I think, Bob, do you have a parting joke or something you want to?
Just on that, you said we could connect, but I don't know that we have each other's contact information because it's all hidden and it's all BCs. And so.
Does everybody here give me permission to share their email with the others here?
Yes, happy
Raise
to.
your hand if you do not. Okay, thank you. Well, with that, we'll sign off here. Just as a point of interest, CPC is meeting tomorrow afternoon, so we'll see a bunch of you then. And Conservation Commission meets next week. So until then.
Thanks very much, Stu. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.